So what we're going to do today is a global imperative panel. What I feel like has happened since we started Whistleblowers of America, something I didn't anticipate, yet another thing I didn't anticipate, was that we were going to start to hear from people who are situated around the world with whistleblower cases. So we just had our 18th country contact us, wanting to know about whistleblower laws in the US, wanting to know about mental health and peer support. So I started to think more and more about needing to connect and have resources globally. And probably one of the few people I first connected with was Georgina Halford-Hall in the UK, because we were definitely getting a lot of British citizens that were reaching out. And as that's expanded and grew, I knew we needed to connect with other people as well in other countries. And I was fortunate this spring, I think I mentioned it yesterday, that I got to spend a week with Georgina in the UK for Whistleblower Awareness Week. And I'm going to let her tell you more about what she did and what she's doing over there. But we also then got to go to South Africa, and I got to meet the folks at Whistleblower House. And we did some panels at the Mandela Institute and several other universities. And I see they've got more panels and more things coming up as well in South Africa. So very excited to see that there's growth and focus on ending or addressing corruption and whistleblower retaliation. And then I got to spend some time in Israel. It is Friday night in Israel, so we won't have the Israelis joining us today. But I know that they are also very interested in building whistleblower programs and having therapists work in law offices, which I'm thrilled, because as therapists, we're always trying to get other professions to understand a trauma-informed perspective. And so I'm very grateful that we're starting to see a lot of coming together. And then I've connected with several other of these panelists that are online today to talk about the programs they have in their countries, their areas of interest, and to see what they're doing and what we can all do maybe more jointly together. And we've got some ideas about that, of course. So I'm gonna kick this over. And I know Vanessa Hall, you're in Australia where it's already getting close to midnight. So I was going to let you get started in case you actually need to drop off and maybe get some sleep. But Vanessa, I think, has a really interesting perspective. And we talked a little bit about coaching yesterday. So I'm excited to see and hear more from you about what you're doing in Australia and how what you're doing can inform what the rest of us are doing. So Vanessa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right? Excellent. Yes, it's 11 p.m. here. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So it's wonderful to be here and to share with you a little bit about my own experience, my own whistleblowing experience, and some of the work that I'm doing around trust. So I want to take a look at this. So I believe we're speaking for about sort of 5 to 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes. And I'll just share a little bit of perspective around my own experience, a little bit around trust, but also what's happening here in Australia, because there's some interesting studies and things, including some global studies that might be of interest as well. So when I look at this, I'm looking at it through the lens of trust and really asking the question that I think anybody involved in whistleblowing is asking, and that is who can we trust? And anybody that's been in this situation, that's really the question that we're asking. Who can we trust? Often the government's let us down, the legislation has let us down. HR, inside the organisation is often let us down. the systems, the policies, the processes let us down. The leadership lets us down. We let ourselves down, often by questioning our own integrity as well, and questioning what we should be doing. And so there's this whole question sitting around, who can we trust, and can we even trust ourselves, and what we're thinking and what we should be doing. So the whole thing I look at it through this lens of trust. So I was actually what I would call an accidental whistleblower back in the late 90s. But my whole career was in compliance. So I was head of compliance. I was one of the very early compliance people in financial services in Australia. And just by virtue of my role, I became aware of some fraud. There was a massive issue. There was a big, over $1 billion deal that was happening, and there was falsification of records that I became aware of, because they were falsifying minutes of meetings that I had taken the minutes for. So I knew that that things were being done that were underhanded, and I simply just did I was playing my role as head of compliance, and was just calling things out, and very quickly found myself in the foyer of my building with a box in my hands, with with my belongings in a box, and a gag order, basically, with no protection. There was no laws or any protection back then, and I was a single parent, and spoke to a few lawyers that I knew, and they basically said, just walk away. Like, you can't fight this company. It was a global organisation, a well-known company that you would all know. So it's really, I've really only come to the realisation fairly recently that I've still carried some of the wounds from that. I probably didn't realise just how much it affected me and my life, and a lot of the decisions that have happened since then. But one of the things that I realised too is that there are obviously people who are in the firing line, or are more open to the opportunity to see issues, and certainly people in compliance as a role or a function are one of those groups of people that I have a heart for. So I was speaking at a compliance conference, just in 2018. About 90 compliance executives from very large organisations in Australia. And I asked them for a show of hands. And I said, how many of you, just want a show of hands, how many of you have been asked at any time in your career to sanitise reports or hide information, or not report breaches or issues to the board or to senior management? And 3/4 of the people in the room put their hands up. So that's about 67 major corporations in Australia that are, at the admission of very senior people that are hiding information. And when I started to dig and started to ask these people why were they allowing this to actually happen, it fell back to not knowing, what to actually do. Who could they trust? They didn't know what to actually do, how to report. Even though the laws are changing, there's still this sort of issue about who could they trust within the system. So my work has been all around trust. It's been my focus now for about 17 years, and how to build trust, how to build trust in leadership, in marketing and branding, and in customer service and so on, but also trust in self and family and community and so on. And so I've been working in this space of trust, and I've written books and so on. I've travelled around the world actually teaching people about the concept of trust and how to build it. And most of the places where I've been called into corporates, I've been called in by people who I found out later they were generally quite desperate in the sense that they really needed somebody to help fix a problem inside their organisation. But they often wouldn't brief me about the issue that was happening. So I would turn up to run a workshop about trust, and there was quite often an elephant in the room, of which I was grossly unaware, and a lot of distrust, amongst the leadership, and quite often that ended up being something quite serious, or some sort of corruption or fraud or some other sort of issue. And so they were looking to me to try and bring trust, to build trust as part of the solution, but going about it in the wrong way. And so often my work ended up falling flat because it was the wrong approach to try and actually do it in that sort of format. It's very difficult to try and build trust in a workshop environment when you've got some a whole lot of issues going on. The people in the room don't trust one another, right from the get-go. And there's a whole lot of things going on, underhanded things happening. So, so it's been a constant, that's been a constant issue in the work that I've been doing. And so I realised that there was a connection between the struggle with some of the work that I've been doing, particularly in larger corporates, and now this whole issue around whistleblowing. So what's been happening in Australia? We've seen a growing movement of the external reporting mechanisms, external whistleblowing bodies, which organisations can use. We've also had a lot of changes in our legislation as well. So we now have, back in 2019, some much greater changes to whistleblowing and whistleblowing protections, and our regulator wrote an open letter to CEOs encouraging them. They did a big review about how those whistleblowing policies were being taken up by corporates, and wrote an open letter, which is available. And I'm happy to send, if that's helpful, I'm happy to sort of send some links to some things that might be useful.
If you could put those in the chat, that would be probably very helpful as we go on, and then Paul will capture them for everybody.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just wrap up on a couple of things, but basically their review identified that even though this new whistleblower protection regime commenced back in July 2019, that a significant number of organisations still hadn't really taken up the proper protections and things. So many of them had they put a policy in place, but they really hadn't taken it to the full extent, and hadn't really paid proper attention to it. They hadn't properly defined what the protections were, and they just said that whistleblowers will be protected, but hadn't described how and so on. So they haven't really clearly articulated it, haven't really put the proper measures in place. So there's some interesting information there. But the major study that has been done that I wanted to draw your attention to is there's a study that they believe it's the largest study that's been done in the world by Transparency International, the Human Rights Law Centre, and Griffith University here in Australia. Was called Whistling While They Work, and it's the second study like this that was done. It was released in November just last year. and they surveyed 17,000 employees from 46 organisations, both public and private organisations, 5,500 whistleblowers were involved in the study, and 3,500 governance staff and managers. So it was a massive study. And within that, there were 646 that were public interest whistleblowers. So those that, where there was potential issues for the general public. And 56% of those that experienced serious levels of detriment, but only 6% of them had received any kind of compensation, and 48% of them had received no remedy at all, which is probably consistent with what you're seeing and experiencing around the world. So we know that there's still a long way to go. We're seeing a lot of changes and shifts in legislation, which is bedding down. But one of the things that I keep coming back to from a trust perspective is you can't legislate trust. And it's one of the things that I often talk about. You can't legislate trust. So we can put these laws and things into place, but so what do we really come back to? And as much as I know that I've been hurt by my own experience, and it has had an impact on the decisions and things that I've made over time as well, at the end of the day, they can't take away our own integrity. So a lot of the work that I do ultimately comes back to the self-trust piece. How can we encourage people to still trust themselves, to trust and just to stay aligned with their own values, that we can improve the systems and protections and things, but at the end of the day, we need to trust ourselves and trust the integrity that we have, and to continue to stand up and to speak up. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Well, thank you. That was a great message. And I think a good way to start is just thinking about what do we do and how do we look at things internationally from a compliance standpoint. So I'm going to go back to the order that's in the program. I was going to start with Georgina Halford-Hall, the founding member of Whistleblowers UK and the current CEO. So Georgina, welcome. And unmute. Georgina, you're on mute. There you go.
I'll row back. 2 secs. Just turning my phone off because that could be devastating. So, good morning, America. Good evening, Australia. And good day to wherever else we are in the world. It's the afternoon here in the UK. I'm going to talk to you, I hope, about the future of whistleblowing and the role of leadership in that. Of course, trust comes into it. So thank you, Vanessa, for giving me a really great segue into the sort of things I want to talk about. And I hope that I don't bore you to sleep, but I'll try and keep things light.
And try to get closer to your microphone.
It was working really great earlier. I've tried it 3 times today. So can you hear me? Everyone hear me?
Sort of.
Okay.
It was really loud earlier, so I can't understand why it's not working. Do you want me to come in next and try and sort my mic out again?
I think we're going to make you louder on our end.
Am I louder now? Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Paul, and all of the team. And I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this conference, because the one thing that COVID has taught us is how to collaborate internationally. Zoom has been a godsend for those of you who believe. But I think you're probably saying, what qualifies her in the UK to do this, especially amongst such an eminent and well-qualified group? I'm not reading from my notes, but if I don't stick to them, I will go all over the place. So Jackie introduced me as the Chief Executive of Whistleblowers UK. I have been, I'm a founding member, and I was appointed the Chief Executive when Tom Lloyd took over as the Chairman in November 2015. And what we do at Whistleblowers UK is we provide help, information and support. And we deal with over 3,000 pieces of correspondence every year on average. Sometimes more, sometimes less. We provide the help, the information support, some affordable legal where we can. But more importantly, we recognise very early on in our journey that it's all very well helping individuals, but you need to change the law because, frankly, the individuals are only being damaged by a completely failed law led by completely, often, inept leaders. So what we have been campaigning for is an independent Office of the Whistleblower. But of course, you need evidence to be able to drive a campaign. And our campaign is now in its sort of hopefully towards the end stages because we have the attention of our government. We have a bill going through Parliament that I'm going to talk to you about. And we certainly have the support of parliamentarians across not only the Conservative Party of the government, but all of the other parties. And around the world, we have attracted a huge amount of support. So don't take my word for it in terms of evidence. Let's look at what we know. Now, we've just heard about over 5,500 whistleblowers coming forward in the Transparency International report. But let's look at it in terms that really push people's buttons. In the UK alone, the National Audit Office has told us that over £350 billion has been lost to fraud in the UK in 2021-22. Goodness knows how bad it's going to be in 23. You'll all have been absolutely astounded by the devastating stories about a nurse called Lucy Letby and the 7 doctors who blew the whistle about her. And I'm sure that there are lots of other staff, but they were kicked into the long grass, to put it politely. And that resulted in the death of 7 babies and the injury of goodness knows how many more. But that's not a single case. It's hit the news because obviously the news, it was a light news week or something, because there are over 650 murders of elderly people at the Gosport Memorial Hospital, allegedly. And that person's never been brought to account, the murderer there. We know that in Nottingham, there are hundreds more babies that have been injured. We know that in Telford and Shropshire, we know in East Kent, that there are literally hundreds of people, babies in particular, because that, a bit like pointing to the person in the wheelchair, attracts the press's attention, are being injured because nobody is acting upon the protected disclosures, or whistleblowing as we know it, raised by the people who speak up. So I'll come back to that. Then we've got tech, we've got Facebook, Pinterest, Amazon. Nobody's out of the frame on this. Child abuse, not being reported, not being investigated, rape, police officers and their conduct. And we have that from all over the world. It's not unique to Britain. I would say, I'm glad to say, but actually I'm not. This is a global problem. It needs a global solution. And the one that causes so much sort of contention and often grabs headlines is all about finance. But in America, we know that last year alone, they recovered over $400 million in fraud alone. It simply shouldn't be happening because what they've all got in common here is that complete failure. Not just a failure of trust in the system, but a failure of the system full stop. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, it's a global group, brilliant people. And they reinforce the point that whistleblowers are the single most effective form or means of uncovering wrongdoing, crime, corruption, cover-up, whatever it may be, wherever it may be happening. They are the informed insiders. They are the citizens' army. And yet, over and over again, by the the compliance teams, HR, by the board, by politicians, by regulators. They are kicked into the long grass. And understandably, when you're trying to raise something, you're quite nervous. You may not act in the way that you've acted professionally in the past. But that should also be a signal to the leaders who have the responsibility and duty to do something, to look more closely. So moving on to what our proposals look like, and they are contained in the Protection for Whistleblowing Bill, which is currently at committee stage in Parliament in the UK. All of this can be found on our website, which is found at wbuk.org. Our proposals call for the repeal of PIDA, which is the Public Interest Disclosure Act, because that legislation, which was groundbreaking at the time, in 25 years has not actually seen a single whistleblowing claim be investigated by the regulators, by the police, or by anybody else. Because that legislation turns a whistleblowing, so some kind of report of a serious wrongdoing, into an employment dispute. All that the employment tribunals have ever been able to look at is not did you whistleblow, but was any whistleblowing responsible for you being dismissed or experiencing detriment? So we're looking at completely turning this on our head. And we want to ensure that we have in place an Office for the Whistleblower, which is one central place that will protect whistleblowers, one central place that will ensure that proper investigations are undertaken, one central place to hold those responsible, those who take the pay for being responsible, to account. And that's not about punishing, but it is about driving learning. And we say that because it's one central place to provide the ongoing education, not just for employers or organizations, but for every single citizen. And I'm going to play into the things that I know that Jackie and Aris are particularly passionate about here, because I want to break that down. Our proposals are going to transform the way that we think about whistleblowing and think about whistleblowers. It's going to promote and drive right doing, rather than, as it does at the moment, facilitates wrongdoing. Because first of all, it's going to be able to be that organisation, that office that removes the whistleblower from the fray, protecting them and taking forward their concerns and ensuring that those who have the obligations, duties and ability to investigate, conduct thorough investigations and demonstrate that the Office for the Whistleblower wants answers, wants feedback, and not just platitudes. They want evidence. And they will be able to commission and oversee investigations. That this office will have statutory powers to impose meaningful and, frankly, quite scary fines and penalties, up to £18 million. I will get on quickly, I promise you. And time in jail. And it will have the ability to fast track feedback to the centre of government to help shape policy and make our legislation continue to be effective. Again, the sharp teeth. Last and most importantly, it is about education, about continuing the campaign and the public awareness and supporting organisations. It's not about punishing people for getting it wrong, but it's about helping them to get it right. So the objectives are to incentivise right doing by normalising speaking up and turn warm words into hard actions, and recognise that we are all global, that whistleblowers from any country or people from any country can be a whistleblower. And this policy and this draft legislation that we put together sets standards that I hope Aris is going to take up in his talk for a global treaty that we can all engage in. Now, I appreciate I've been about 10 minutes, so I'm now going to hand over and say I'm more than happy to take any questions, and I'm sorry for my sound. Jackie, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we'll hold questions to the end because I want to give everybody a chance to get through the panels, and then we can open up discussion. So I'm going to turn now my attention to our sister to the north. Pamela Forward is the President and Executive Director of Whistleblowing Canada Research Society. So Pamela, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And yes, just by way of description, our organization is a young nonprofit corporation, unlike their executive director, with charitable registration in Canada. We were founded in 2019, and I can't tell you how happy I am to be here in this group. It gets really lonely where we are at times, and you'll understand what I mean as I talk about what's happening in Canada. And it's truly a privilege to be with you all. We certainly have common cause, and I'm really anxious to continue the conversation, to learn more, to gain insights into how we can progress in our corner of the world here in Canada as we try to improve things for those of us who are punished for trying to work ethically, and as we try to stop wrongdoing by disclosing it to someone we believe can, will, and should do something about it, but don't. So these are the whistleblowers, or as I like to call them, the truth tellers. And Jackie, you asked us to talk a bit about our vision, our mission, and what we're doing about reprisals. So I'll try to do that briefly. Our vision at Whistleblowing Canada is we see a Canada where no truth teller is punished for telling the truth. A Canada where whistleblowing laws and cultures respect, protect, support, value, and compensate honest truth tellers and appropriately address and sanction misconduct and wrongdoers. And our purpose and mission is to advance education and understanding of the whistleblowing phenomenon through research and disseminate this information publicly. So really, we're talking about major system change through education and research. So we hope then, and our mission is to improve the practice of whistleblowing, the lives of whistleblowers and Canadians at large, and accountability really in Canadian organizations by encouraging and informing public policy dialogue and development. And we do this through seminars, conferences, telling stories, lectures, training for the benefit of everyone really, including leaders in Canadian public and private organizations. And we hope that this shared knowledge and all of this effort by our small group will spark a strong public will. That's what we need, a public understanding and a public will to campaign for change, and thus stimulate the political will, which really is non-existent at present in our country, regardless of what our politicians say, because really it's what they do that tells us their real intent. And right now it does not look good at all. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing about reprisals. So, and that is in our organization. First, we've identified through our research why reprisals occur, and that is really what sparked the founding of our organization. And I'm going to list the reasons that we found. And then our next steps are to address these problems, as I said, through education, research, and advocacy. So first, weak, ineffective laws. Canada's laws are known to be the worst in the world, with no best practices. And according to a recent study, we are tied with Lebanon and Norway, it seems, in terms of this ineffective laws. Dysfunctional organizational and political cultures characterized by deception, impunity, self and reputational protection over public protection, distrust, inhumanity, obduracy, narcissism, etc. And Georgina and Vanessa have given examples of all of this. The other thing is attitudes in the courts. We see often employer-friendly standards and disrespect for whistleblowers, and also long outdated and archaic notions of loyalty, not relevant for modern democratic societies at all. And in fact, in Canada, we are losing trust in our courts and our legal system. Recent studies showed that less than 50% in the 40s actually believe they can get fair decisions in our courts. So this is pretty bleak. And the most surprising thing that we found was that laws alone won't protect whistleblowers. Culture counts. And again, Vanessa, you talked about that with your discussion about trust. And that's really about establishing cultures where you can trust, that you'll be listened to when you speak up. So if laws are introduced into an unwelcoming culture, they'll not be upheld. So this is an overview and a huge task, but at Whistleblowing Canada, we dream no little dreams. And that's a quote from the first socialist premier, actually, of one of our provinces, Saskatchewan, in 1944. And his dream was big. He's known as the father of Medicare, which had a huge impact for the health and well-being of the people in our country. So we're advocating for changes around these issues at a more micro level. When people call, we listen and tell them what we know about our laws. Not even 10% of workers are covered by whistleblowing protection laws, mostly just public servants, no one in the private sector. We tell them, and this has been confirmed by academic studies, the best way to be safe is to blow the whistle anonymously. We help them sort out options they can pursue for moving ahead. We suggest how to organize paperwork to attract the interest of lawyers and journalists. And sometimes if we believe there might be common interests, we link them with another whistleblower. And this is just a bare minimum of what is needed. We have no staff lawyers to help whistleblowers, and they can't find any willing to take their cases. We have no staff counselors or therapists to help them make sense of what's happening to them as they are bullied, harassed, and abused by employers and colleagues who were former friends. That's the sad part. We have no staff social workers to help steer them to sources of support, both financial and otherwise. And I'm sorry to say, we really need more philanthropists in our country who truly understand the danger to not only our people, but to our democracy by allowing this state of affairs to continue. You know, in a country of 40 million people, we are the only non-institutional civil society organization that pays any attention at all to the whistleblowing plight and the phenomenon. So that's why we're run almost entirely by volunteers. But wait, there is a bit of good news too, and I've saved the best for last. We sent out a press release recently, and some of you will probably know about this, announcing a grant we have been awarded from the Law Foundation of Ontario, Canada's largest province. And this is really good news. The grant is to conduct a survey of lawyers so we can produce a directory of lawyers who are willing to work on whistleblower cases. And secondly, to produce short videos to educate the general public, potential whistleblowers, on their rights under the law. we have amazing laws. They're just not upheld. That's the problem. In terms of our human rights laws, problems everywhere. So this funding is going to help provide a lifeline of legal information and education to assist one of the most underserved populations in Ontario, whistleblowers. And it's really about access to justice. The Law Foundation of Ontario gets it. We need many more people to also get it. We have a long list of other projects that we need funding for, and we hope the Law Foundation's leadership will point the way for other funders who want to contribute to the public good with their financial support. And, you know, Jackie, I just recently told one of your lawyers from GAP, we in Canada are about, you know, in our development in the whistleblowing field, we're about where they started 40 years ago when they first founded. So I'm sorry to have to deliver this, but on the other hand, you can tell why I'm happy to be here and why I don't feel so lonely anymore. And that, you know, this has been a really, really wonderful boost and encouragement for us, this grant. And we hope that it augurs well for a whole lot of good things to happen. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Well, congratulations. That is good news. And I'm glad you're able to share it with a community that does support you. You know, in our own spaces, we don't feel like the odd ducks, but in the rest of the world, we are we used to call it the war of small numbers when you look at some of the data. And we are a small group of people. And I do think that we need each other because to work together and have these international conversations, because I see, and I don't know if you can see everybody in the room and the heads that are nodding as everybody is talking, because we do have a universal need to understand whistleblowers and the harm that retaliation can cause. So in moving on with our program, and I do want to come back, by the way, because we have some lawyers here that is, we think about what goes on internationally and globally. We did have some presentations yesterday from some of the programs in the US, and the foreign nationals can bring their cases to the US and participate in some of our programs. And I know that's controversial, but I think people should be able to be given the choice that if there's a reward program they can participate in, whether they're in the US or another country, we should be sharing that information and letting people make those decisions on their own. I don't know if Cynthia's online yet. She told me to maybe put her at the end of the agenda. So I'm going to skip over and go to Jenny Foster, because I think, Pamela, you talked about the bullying, and I know that Jenny is sort of become the expert on the anti-bullying movement in Ireland and the harm that it causes. And I know she's also very familiar with Jennifer Foster, the lady who wrote the book, The Bullied Brain. Did I get that right?
Jennifer Fraser.
Thank you. Yeah, so The Bullied Brain, I have found, that came out of Canada. I know she's on your board as well. I found that book to be really informative. So Jenny, over to you and the hashtag BullyTo.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Ari, and also Paul. Yeah, it's great to be here today with all these wonderful people, mainly women. I'm absolutely delighted, and to see my old friend Georgina there as well. You know, it's fantastic to be part of this conference and to be able to share with you what we're doing in Ireland at the moment. We might be a small country, but nevertheless, we do still have a far way to go when it comes to whistleblower detriment and bullying in the workplace. A little bit like Vanessa, I was an accidental whistleblower. I highlighted alleged bullying in the workplace. And at the same time, I highlighted it was fraud or misappropriation of government funds. So I use my own case as a case study. So I just explain how Better Working Lives for All was set up. I use my own case as a case study. And what I found out was if you're bullied in the workplace, you've nowhere to turn. So you use all the government departments, you might use the Health and Safety Authority, and there's absolutely nothing can be done other than they check a policy, they don't support the worker at all. And then when you do eventually take your case to the Employment Tribunal, it's called the Workplace Relations Commission here, even if under the Industrial Relations Act, bullying is proven, there's the company itself don't have to take the recommendations on board. So there's no, it's really useless. So with that in mind, back in April 2021, I decided to form a multidisciplinary committee. So on that committee, there was a barrister, there was actually Dr. Mona Moore, who was the first academic who did a report on bullying in the workplace. And that was back 20 years previous. And a lot of other academics, Dr. Deirdre Curran and other people, amazing people. And I have to say they were thoroughly amazing, just really to take something to the government whereby we could look at changing legislation. We did that. We didn't get a very good response on it. And in fact, what we were looking for wasn't a full change in legislation. It was like an anti-bullying law. However, that didn't work for us. They came back and basically said that the current code of practice is in place and won't be changed. But that hasn't stopped Better Working Lives for All, because now we're going down the route of contacting the trade unions, and hopefully I will know in the next couple of weeks whether they're going to support that change in legislation and push for us that way. But then I actually got involved with Whistleblowers UK, and I'm an associate member. I've had a lot of experience, shall we say, in whistleblowing in Ireland, and we do have the EU directive, and I know Ari will know a little bit about this. And we have what is called the Protected Disclosures Commissioner, and that's part of the EU directive. That's whereby an employee, a minister, or a prescribed person can use that office, and they can highlight a protected disclosure. I soon found out that, shall we say, certainly in Ireland, it could have been a little bit of window shopping. There wasn't much. I used that facility, and there, as much as I hate, because we're a small country, very nice people in it, but unfortunately quite ineffective. So unfortunately it hasn't, in my opinion, been set up correctly, and in fact they still haven't got all their ducks in a row. I don't really want to say why, but they certainly haven't got all their ducks in a row at the moment. So I know it's newly formed, it's just in January. And then going forward, Pamela, Dr. Catherine Phillips, I came into contact with Dr. Catherine Phillips on LinkedIn, and we decided that we would look at forming a organization called #BullyTo. We formed the organization, which was a global movement, really, and it's been a godsend. I think some people will tell you it's been a godsend. We've got a support group. We've got a Zoom, a monthly Zoom, and also we changed the name to Working Together #BullyTo, because some people were saying that if their workplaces saw that they were part of a movement called #BullyTo, they may feel that they were bullied in the workplace. Whereas what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to work with employers, legislation, governments and give each country the autonomy to go forward. And we're going to develop it a little bit more and have almost like a little resource pack for each country so that they can go forward and do the same in each country. But that is, we're only newly formed, but we've already got fantastic feedback, and I think it's going to grow in spades over the next few months. But other than that, I can't think of anything else I need to say. But I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me here today and to be part of this amazing imperative group. And I'm so delighted. Thanks so much.
Thank you. No, you're doing very interesting and amazing work. And I've sat in on some of the support group sessions that you have. And again, I think it speaks volumes that across borders, we can be helping each other, because the one person here in this room who has a case, who's trying to make headway, is really being supported and uplifted by this universal effort to get a better understanding of whistleblower retaliation. And I know Tom Devine's been doing this for 40 years and GAP has been around for 40 years. I think they're very welcoming that there are these other groups, and we're stepping into their space, and we're not lawyers stepping into the space. We're social workers, we're nurses, we're researchers, we're other professionals that are taking this out of the secretiveness of a court or a judicial or an employment tribunal, and we're making this more and more a louder message. And I think, I'm always reminded of the, I think he was a priest that talked about that when no one stood up against the Nazis, they eventually came for him and there was nobody left to speak out. So we have to have this universal effort, because when it's one person, one case, it now involves all of us, because we all now have skin in the game and we care about each other. And I think that is really where we're at and how important this is. So Jenny, thank you. You're not doing a little thing, you're doing a big thing. And I see you have the book, The Bully Brain, behind you that I just mentioned. So that's a good little plug there for that book, because it is really a very fascinating read. So I'm going to turn my attention now to the Norway Labor Inspection Authority and welcome Heidi Haugland Walker, who is probably the only one on the panel that actually works for a government agency. So Heidi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer and Paul, and all of you. It's very nice to see you and to hear you speak about whistleblowing. I've been looking forward to this important conference. My name, as Jackie said, is Heidi Haugland Walker, and I work as a senior inspector in the Norwegian Labor Inspection Authority. And my main tasks are, among others, whistleblowing, receipt of notifications, inspections, and guidance. And now I will tell you briefly about our role and responsibility in whistleblowing. And first I will tell you about how the Norwegian working life is organized, and then about the inspectorate and the role and mandate on our priorities in whistleblowing. And it was like Jennifer also said, that Norway, we are also a small country, but we try to work systematically with whistleblowing. And to secure these legal intentions regarding whistleblowing, one of the several important tasks for the Norwegian Labour Inspection Authority is whistleblowing. And the inspectorate is engaged in efforts to strengthen knowledge about whistleblowing in the Norwegian working life and how this should be handled. We have the competence to make decisions in cases of obligation to prepare guidelines for internal whistleblowing. We provide guidance to employees and enterprises on the whistleblowing regulations on matters relating to whistleblowing retaliation, the concept of issues of concern, and how to handle whistleblowing cases. On this, we just have the competence of guiding. But we can also be notified of breaches of the Working Environment Act as a public authority. And we receive about 10,000, 12,000 of these notifications per year. We have guidance on the website at seminars, courses, and of course in inspections. And we also provide guidance to employers and employees who visit the Labour Inspection Authority's locals office. And we also have this answering service, which responds to approximately 70,000 telephone inquiries per year and 13,000 emails per year. But the Inspectorate does not have the authority to assess whether the employee is the victim of retaliation and cannot assess questions of guilt or compensation claims in such cases. That is for the court to decide. But in 2021, there was a new section added in the law, and the Norwegian Equality and Anti-Discrimination Tribunal can now consider complaints concerning retaliation after reporting of issue or concern condition at the workplace. So we still, of course, there is the court, but also this anti-discrimination tribunal. And legally, the institution of whistleblowing in Norway arises from the fundamental right to express oneself. And that's in the Norwegian constitution. And in order to strengthen employees' genuine freedom of expression, we also have regulations on whistleblowing, Chapter 2A of the Working Environment Act. So the whistleblowing legislation is in the Working Environment Act. And there it has its own chapter and 8 sections. This entails a recognition that both the workplace and society need employees who blew the whistle to uncover issues of concern. Employees' ability to express themselves depends on a good climate for freedom of expression at work. And one of the purposes now in the Working Environment Act is therefore to facilitate a good climate for freedom of expression in the workplace. And this one is new as well. So that means that employees that blow the whistle, they have the legal amendments in recent decades have provided employees with double legal protection based on the Section 100 in the Constitution and then the provisions in the Working Environment Act. But still, this may not always be what happens in practice. And Pamela, she mentioned that maybe sometimes legislation is not enough, and we have to see also what happens in practice. And I will tell you a little bit about our legal framework. And we have this Chapter 2A in the Working Environment Act, which regulates whistleblowing in employment relationships, and it has 8 sections. It started in 2007, and the whistleblowing legislation is quite new in Norway, comparing to lots of other countries. But in 2007, we got this special legislation on whistleblowing, and it was added to the Working Environment Act. And employees gain the right to report issues of concern and then to be protected against retaliation. The provision have been amended in 2007 and 2020. The amendment in 2017 introduced an obligation to devise whistleblowing procedures in enterprises with 5 employees or more. And in 2020, changes were made to clarify the legal situation regarding whistleblowing and strengthen the protection for employees report wrongdoing at work. So it's been all the time from the beginning, it's been the focus is to strengthen the protection of those who report wrongdoing. And in December 2000, 2015, the Labour Inspection Authority was put in charge by the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs as a coordinator of an ongoing national whistleblowing project in Norway. And the goal was to report, those who report issues should not have the risk of retaliation. And this was the inspectorate invited then 13 public agencies and altogether, and a joint action plan for the public agencies was prepared. And the whistleblowing project in Norway has resulted in various lessons learned, including requirements for establishing and maintaining a full function whistleblowing system. So all the public authorities or the surveillance authorities must have this know-how to handle a whistleblowing notification from a whistleblower. And guidelines for receipt and processing of external whistleblowing reports to public agencies and guidance to whistleblowers were made. In October 2022, a meeting with the public authorities again was arranged. And here the status for the project and the EU directive, as Jennifer also mentioned, and research were presented. This was also a big project in Norway, and it still is going on, and the work is still going on. And in Norway, we have 3 levels of whistleblowing. You can report issue of concern internally, but then you also can report issue of concern externally, and then you can report to a public authority. Or you can report to the media, but on special. It's a. I don't remember. Sorry, the name. A special condition. So you can report to the media, but it's a special condition. That's the 3 levels in Norway. And Jennifer, she mentioned a bit about this EU directive. It isn't implemented, not yet. Norway is a part of the EEA agreement, and whether this should be incorporated into the EEA agreement is still under consideration. So we are still waiting, to see what's happening with the directive for Norway.
Heidi, what do you think of it? Have you had a look at it? What do you think of the EU directive?
I haven't been closely looked at it yet. Not closely. But I think it's the lesson also. We are improving the legislation. We are having lots of focus on it. We work on it. But at the same time, robust legislation is essential to protect whistleblowers against retaliation and other injustice. But at the same time, these legislations must be adopted and they must be effectively implemented, and especially in those enterprises locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. And I see Georgina maybe wants to add something.
I'm having a button problem today, guys. Apologies. Heidi, really, really interesting. Same with you, Jennifer. And what I'm fascinating, and I wanted to ask a quick question is, where are you with you said that you're still doing conversations with the EU directive and you're not part of the EU in the same way, so you don't have the impetus, but you're not forced to adopt it as it stands. Where do you see are the key areas for improvements in it? Because I have to say that we've looked at it and we think that it's a step backwards, not a step forward, particularly in the fact that each member state has to have its own offices. It creates huge problems for business and industry. and also in language in terms of how things are introduced, means that you could do something legally in one country and the one next door you're acting illegally. How are you coping? How are you going to tackle that one?
No, we haven't. I haven't been in the work with this EU directive so closely yet, but it's still under consideration, and we have people in the Norwegian Labour Inspection Authority that is dedicated to this work. But I'm not one of them, so I can't tell you anything about this now. Sorry.
Apologies for putting you on the spot. Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Georgina, maybe Ari has a bit of more information on this as well. Sorry to bring you in there, Ari. But the EU directive, from my own perspective, from being prior to the 2023 directive being in the system, it is stronger, Georgina, without a doubt it is. No, honestly, because it brings in, obviously, the Protected Disclosure Commissioner, which is not, and a bit like what Heidi said, we do have to give these things time to settle in, you know. I mean, we have to realise as well that it does take a little bit of time. But there's other, raising protected disclosure. It's different to the previous one. With regards to detriment and other issues, I find it stronger, Georgina. I'd have to look at it again. I'm put on the spot there, but I definitely, Georgina, I do think it is a little. It's not the what you're prescribing to, absolutely not. But I do think it's stronger than what we've previously had. I have to be honest. I'm just giving my honest opinion there.
Well, most of the member states didn't have any legislation at all. So the fact that it's brought forward that every member state will have to have legislation, I just think it's an opportunity to do a good job rather than a half job and bring everybody up to a level. Sorry, Ari, keep relying on you. We all do, but
Ari's just kind of going, yeah.
You know, of creating a global treaty. You know, you gave us the title, and we're now filling in the gaps. And I personally think that the EU directive is going to be a step backwards, because everyone will say we've done it now. And actually, all you've done is put more barriers in the way of whistleblowers in terms of engaging them in litigation that's unnecessary. It's not going to really appreciate the way that work is changing, and it's going to continue to change. And I guess something's better than nothing, but it'll be an excuse not to do anything for another 10 years. I'm going to mute at that point.
That could be true. That could be true, Georgina. Ari?
I'll jump in.
Aye, so interesting. Right, look, guys, we're gonna take a step back. I mean, we're talking about a lot of countries in the EU, and they're divided by culture. They're divided, north-south economies, mentality, language barrier. Their national laws are outdated. So what they actually did is unprecedented. They introduced a legislation, that it has to be adopted by so many countries. For me, that is unprecedented. It's a baby step, but we did it. We enforce it. And also, the fact that we allowed NGOs, to have a say within the EU. We can allocate NGOs to actually monitoring whistleblower investigations. The fact that we said, guys, whistleblowers, you can choose how you're going to make your disclosure. We have, like Jennifer, you said, we have internal disclosure, we have external disclosure, and we have external disclosure via the media. It's our choice. I can go out there and say, I can go to the media, break a story, and I'm protected if I suffer from retaliation. I mean, to me, that's very important. Article 19, freedom of expression of speech. I can do it. In some other countries, I don't know how the US works, or the UK, you're losing your right to be of a whistleblower. So we did quite a lot. Now, there are so many countries involved that, again, it's baby steps. We can't just go and bombard them with limitations and say, that's it, go to your constitution, go to your politicians. It's my way or the highway. EU is going to break apart. So we're going to have to be gentle about the approach, baby steps. And that was a tremendous step forward. So there are many things to be done. I mean, we're going to come to that suggestion later on. But I'm positive about the EU legislation and the directive.
Ari, I often thought, why don't they do it for bullying? My next step is to try and get something in EU-wide, the exact same, but to force member states to bring in legislation for bullying. There isn't one EU state that has any legislation for psychological damage in the workplace.
From what I understand, at least for Greece, where I live now, bullying, psychological bullying is part of the condition of the EU. No. We have a clause for that. They identify psychological bullying at the place of work, and
it's under the Health and Safety. It's under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Check it out, Ari. Honestly, I'm dealing with all EU states. We don't have a legislation that you can basically take to an employment tribunal and that you can be compensated on. Maybe we do have it, but we can't be. It's not. You cannot be compensated if you are bullied in the workplace.
Okay, so we must separate the two. You're talking about compensation after you suffer retaliation by psychological bullying at the place of work.
Well, even anything. So for instance, if you take take this has gone a different direction. But if you actually take psychological bullying, a case on psychological bullying to your employment tribunal, I not even compensate. I don't even mean monetarily. I mean get your job back. Anything. You will not. There's no way to bring it to an employment tribunal and to get a company to either compensate you, give your job back, to compensate you monetarily, to anything. To you check it out, Ari. I'd love to hear if it is, because we went to our government and there's nothing. We couldn't give we were looking for something that is not in the EU.
Okay, well, we just did the transposition to the directive, the Greek legislation, and it's in black and white. It's got a condition that says they're forbidden to do that, psychological bullying at the place of work. So it is forbidden to be done. And what does forbidden means?
But what happens? Yeah, they might say forbidden, but what happens if they do it?
Now, this is a different story altogether. We're going from loose theory, so the legislation, but that's all over the world. It's a global phenomenon. Do we implement the legislation? Does it get implemented? We go from judiciary to enforcing it. That's something we have this issue all over the world. So we work. No,
but Ari, is there legislation to back up what they say? Is there legislation to back up the fact that they say?
In Greece, we have specific legislation about that. And
well, please provide it to me, because I will send it to our Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Because when we went to look for, we could not find any legislation that backs that up in the workplace.
Okay, I'm happy to send you that correspondence.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Okay, I know we still have two more panelists that haven't had a chance to present yet. I can't see all the screens to see if everybody is online, but our next speaker is supposed to be Carlos Yaco from Peru. Carlos, are you online? No? Paul, can you text him? Text him. Okay. Email him. All right. And I don't know if Cynthia has joined. Cynthia, are you on? Oh, I can't see. Well, I know Cynthia said she was going to be late. So I don't know. I can't see no. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to then turn the mic back to Ari, and we will let him do his presentation, and then maybe we can continue more of the dialogue.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's start with the basics. We adopted the whistleblowing concept. We all know what it is. We like the idea to be protected at the place of work and not be afraid to speak about wrongdoing. We know the benefits. Everybody covered it up. I'm not going to go through the same. But now, a sentence came to my mind, which is divide and conquer. So we have clusters all over the world. We are the clusters. We are the watchdogs against corruption. We have NGOs all over the world. We have scattered philanthropists. And we all try to do the right thing. But we are clustered. We are all over the world. So what we need, it's a new approach that we'll be working on. We need the introduction of international treaty for whistleblowers. Now, why do we need international treaty for whistleblowers? Because exactly the problems we're debating just now with Jennifer and everybody else, that, we have different national legislation, conflict of interest. We have, as I like to call it, a fabrication of the interpretation of the law sometimes, and cross-border conflicts between legislations. So how do we solve that? And what does a whistleblower really needs? We addressed that with some of you 2 days ago. And from our point of view, a whistleblower needs to be alive, okay? And he needs to stay alive. The first thing is that most of them are getting killed. I'm talking about South Africa, and I'm passing the message today globally. South Africa, stop killing your whistleblowers, please. Mm-hmm. It's a hostile country. They get persecuted, killed. I was forced into exile over a decade ago because I thought I was doing the right thing, blow the whistle on torture and extrajudicial killing at the place of work, the police force. So at the time when I escaped, I was lucky. I had a second passport. I had a dual citizenship. So I could duck. I could force myself into exile. I survived. Other whistleblowers, they haven't. A recent example, South Africa, Papita de Coran, she got murdered for doing the right thing. She got assassinated, in 2021. She blew the whistle on corruption at the place of work. She had no second passport, okay? She didn't have a dual citizenship. She was trapped on a hostile environment, a hostile country. She got killed. So this is fundamental rule number one. How do we protect whistleblowers that initial period of time, which is crucial for them to survive? How do we approach that? We have so many obstacles, cross-border obstacles. And that's why we came with the idea of an introduction of international visa for whistleblowers in distress. Now, imagine if I'm going to blow the whistle, so I'm sitting now with a multi-million, corruption information, and all there's they're going to kill me. There's a tag on my head. I'm expendable. We've seen it everywhere, all around the world. So what do I do? Where do I go to? Obviously, I'm not going to go to the authorities because we know what's going on there. The best thing is to have established a mechanism that I can approach through an office of the whistleblower, through an embassy who is part of a country who has a treaty with a global international treaty, and they can review my case quickly, temporarily issue me an international visa, relocate me and my family if I can prove I am, legit and people try to kill me. And I can leave with a passport to a friendly country, and then I won't have the problem of looking behind my back, thinking about if me or my family are going to get kidnapped, get killed, or persecuted, jailed. And then I can cooperate better. I can be utilized and blow the whistle without having that pressure, that post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is the idea we have. And I think it's the next step. EU started baby steps. Okay, start doing something with a directive. It's a start, but we need to get a unified legislation, minimum international standards that is globally recognized, and we need to get countries who are interested and they have a low score in PCI, to sign the treaty and then prove to the rest of the world that they want to fight corruption. That's my introduction, and I can take questions on that and go into details. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And if Cynthia joins, we can have her come back on. I know we're looking for Carlos as well. It's always hard when you do these panels. That's why we always invite extra people in case we lose one or two. And I know how hard it is when you're working internationally to try to coordinate all these things. But we have, I think, the beginnings of a very interesting discussion. I'm hoping, and we have people online that can put questions in the chat. I know I've seen that some of you have started to put resources in the chat as well, websites and links, and we'll try to capture all of that so that we can share some things more later, and that people want to come back. We'll try to do our best to make everything everybody shares available. So I think I think we're getting Cynthia. So before we go to that, I'm going to welcome her and let her present a little bit about the Whistleblower House and what they're doing in South Africa. As I mentioned, I've had the privilege of actually traveling to South Africa and getting to meet Cynthia in person. They're also a sort of a new effort, just getting started, and I think are doing some amazing work. I know South Africa is a country with problems, but I think what you're doing is really a direction or a sea change for so many of us that are in this space and trying to figure out how to help whistleblowers. So Cynthia, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I'm so glad you were able to join.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me, and my sincere apologies for starting late. We just had a board meeting which I needed to complete. I do have a presentation. If you'd like me to share it, I can do so, and then we can take it from there.
Sure, Paul.
Shall I share it? Otherwise, I will just talk, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to make you a host and then you can share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Otherwise, I'll just talk and I can always submit later. Let's see, I'm waiting.
Yeah. He's coming.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think you should be able to go ahead.
There we go. So I'm currently at Jackie's introduced me already as Cynthia Stimpel. We started the Whistleblower House some time back because of the need and the gap we saw within our organization. And I'd like to just start off, before I go into detail, just with a definition. I see I'm unable, there's it. We've decided that, having looked at various definitions through Transparency International, Corruption Watch, the Oxford Dictionary, it has many ways of depicting and defining a whistleblower. But because we wanted to encompass the full whistleblower, because some people just report something to their boss, expecting the boss to do something about it. So they're not going through a formal whistleblower channel, and yet they lose their their jobs, they are victimized for it. So we've defined a whistleblower as someone who in good faith report wrongdoing in an organization to someone that they believe will take action to address it. And obviously that doesn't happen often. And if we look at the history of whistleblowers and what they've suffered is, and I'm sure you've all covered this, in the picture there you can depict the people on the right side are many of the people who gave evidence at the Zondo Commission, which was South Africa's state capture commission, whereby the reported malfeasance, misconduct, extreme fraud. We went through many years of corruption in our country. And so any person who's done that, they immediately become outcasts. They face civil and criminal prosecution. Many of us lost our jobs. We are defamed. We are ostracized. We are pushed to the outskirts of civilization. Mm-hmm. And many suffer, which is the area and expertise of Jackie, is the the trauma stress disorder. Many of us go through anxiety and depression. Many of us suffer further psychiatric help needed. And it's a knock-on effect for families, if you've noticed. And I love the intention that in the future, they'll be looking, I think there's a discussion around children of whistleblowers, because they too feel that anxiety and depression. Many obviously have suffered death threats, and many even have committed suicide. We have a case of someone who's committed suicide in our very parliament because of what has happened. So if I go into where Whistleblower House came about, was because of all the history of the whistleblowers, we found that there was this gap and no one could fulfill it. And we thought, how then do we look and sort out, resolve the whistleblower issues because we only had our legal section. But when you had any counseling or people looked at you and thought this is not what we should be focusing on. And so with this is that like-minded people got together, and the earlier founders was Ivan Pillay, who was also whistleblower of SARS, which is our reserve, not our reserve bank, sorry, our South African Revenue Services. And together with him was Liesel Groenewald, who works with the Ethics Institute, and the other founder was Bianca Goodson. And through that, they then asked for other people to join and be directors. I was one of the people approached together with my colleague, Ben Theron. And the two of us are now as executive directors with our hands on, working closely with the work that with whistleblowers. Mm-hmm. And we have three non-executive directors, which is Ivan Liesel and Martha Ngoya, who was also a whistleblower from the PRASA in our country, which is the passenger rail services. What services we offer, because we found that all whistleblowers need legal services. And most people tend not to speak out because they realize that if they speak out, they may not have the funding to pay for legal services. So they rather tend to keep quiet. Those that were courageous enough to speak out after losing their jobs also suffered financial detriments and then could not even pay their lawyers. So that was a key component. And it was in this light that we decided as Whistleblower House, we're going to support whistleblowers through the legal. So at the moment, we have only 9 firms which support us through pro bono focus. 2 firms have been really great with Whistleblower House in that they look at many of our cases. They give guidance pro bono, or they will write an affidavit pro bono sometimes. Other times when they feel that there's more work to be done, more hours, they then submit a fee to us, the invoices, but at a reduced cost. So whereas the first session you'd have with a lawyer would be 15,000, between 10 and 15,000, our lawyers have reduced those costs very much, that they will charge us a small amount per hour of work that they're doing. So that has helped us greatly. When we started out last year, we had absolutely no funding. And no matter which funding or donor funders we wrote to, everyone thought, who's this new kid on the block? What are they going to achieve? How are they going to repay? But by the end, by early this year, we were getting some funding in, and now we're able to pay for some legal costs. So what we do is that we, once we get the onboarding form, we submit it to a legal firm. They will review it. And if they can do some pro bono work, they do it up front, and they give a full review and feedback to the whistleblower, which we then they would phone the whistleblower direct, either meet with them or do it online. When there's further work to be done, they need to take the case to a disciplinary hearing, CCMA in our country, which we use, which is your conciliation and arbitration committee meetings. They would then give them guidance and charge for their time. If it has to go to the labor court, they will prepare for that and take it to the labor court. We're sitting with 2 cases at present that will go into litigation. So we're just praying that it does go successfully. The lawyers will not take on any work that they feel cannot have prospects of success. So it is on that basis they will then take this further. Regarding health, we have offered counseling services. Last year, we partnered with the Psych SA of South Africa, who provided psychologists pro bono. This year, because we had funding and we saw the benefit of it, we now have also partnered with individual psychologists, and who have advised us that they need at minimum 10 sessions per whistleblower. So we provide that. When the whistleblower completes their forms, I recommend them to a respective counselor, who will then take them through the sessions. Should they require more, they will advise us. Should the family need more, like a daughter, a son, a wife would need additional counseling, what we then recommend is that they see a separate counselor to the partner, just so that the process of confidentiality remains, but we also will pay for that. We had so far one whistleblower that, while the counselor was working with her, found that she was very close to being suicidal, contacted us and said, look, I have a case that would need psychiatric care, and we said we will pay for it, which we did. This person went in for 1 week, just taken care of immediately, and this person is now in a far better mental health state. So it's the timeousness of being able to help whistleblowers. Another area of service that we're providing at the moment is the safety of whistleblowers. We do it in 2 parts. The one is that we try and first give them guidance that they shouldn't be as often on social media. What they publicize, their family, their children, they're putting them all at risk. The second is that they're telling them which events they're going to, etc. And even if they're going to want to blow the whistle, they come to us, they tell us, I haven't yet disclosed. How do we do it? We tell them, we put them to a lawyer, but then they go and tell their friend in their coffee areas and saying, look, I decided to do this. I'm going to blow the whistle. Someone overhears, and sooner the person is immediately victimized by the organization. And we on our side haven't yet put the process in place. So up front, we're giving them guidance that once we start helping you stay low on social media, minimize whatever your movements are, protect your family, protect your home. That's on the guidance side. We also offer on the safety that if they need their homes upgraded with security, we get someone to come and do an assessment. And especially if they know that they're being followed monitored or watched, and that we can protect them in their homes. And then the third thing we're working on, but haven't yet given to any of our whistleblowers, is we're looking at an app. So with an organization who's building the app, that it goes on every whistleblower's phone, that if the minute they're in the street, because your risks are when you're driving your car and when you're just approaching your home or leaving your home, there you are unguarded and you out of your security zone and you're vulnerable. So we producing this, working with a security organization on this app that we can soon give to all the whistleblowers. If they can press this app, an armed response should come to where they are. So if they're about to be hijacked outside their home, an armed response can pitch to their home within 5 minutes. If they're driving somewhere and they're feeling insecure, they have to advise that we're going here. I'm feeling very insecure. I've seen cars following me. We haven't launched it yet. It's being worked on, and we hope to launch it very soon to give to our whistleblowers. The company is called Aura, and they provide emergency services. And once that's done, we will go live with that. The next service offering we have is financial. We obviously couldn't do it at all last year. And this year, because all these amounts are in our budget, we were able to help. So from February this year, we've been able to give whistleblowers some funding. And we're looking at a stipend, we call it a survival stipend, where they can just pay for the necessary things to get through, which is 15,000 Rand per month over 6 months. So we first pay off the first 3 months for them, and then we pay out another 3 months once they come back. I normally just check, are you okay? You can come back to us should you need that amount. We know it's not much. We cannot pay off whistleblowers' bonds. We cannot pay off their credit cards, etc. But this is for them just to be able to put food on the table, to have airtime for their phones, towards maybe they can still pay their rent towards the bonds. Some may not have huge bonds to pay, but can upkeep their living or rental conditions. And that way they're able to survive. And hence we're calling it a survival stipend. So just to give you an indication of the demand for services we've had just when we started. So last year, the head count, if you look at the first column, was that those were the number of whistleblowers that came to us requesting assistance. The majority asked for legal. We've sent to legal departments. Unfortunately, especially last year, the whistleblowers that came to us, their cases were very old, as in 2010, 2011. And so the cases have prescribed, and we've been unable to help them from a legal perspective. And so on that basis, we then offered them counseling, we offered them the safety, and we offered them the finance. This year, we're seeing a change in the type of whistleblowers coming to us. Their cases have not yet prescribed, many of them, and some of them are now asking before they even disclose in the organizations that they want to whistleblow. And so that way we can try now and protect them to keep the anonymity, that they don't go and disclose in channels where their names are exposed, and hence their names are out there, and they can then easily lose their livelihood, their jobs, and put their own lives at risk. So we're trying very hard to prevent that now. And so, but the majority have already disclosed, or the majority are only stopping something. Like they will just say their boss, like one case was their boss requested every staff member to increase their time, their timelines that they put in the hours, because if they do that, they can get more funding from the funders. And one whistleblower said that is wrong, that's unlawful, that's unethical, I'm not doing it. And because he stood up and refused to change his timesheet, he lost his job. So he didn't disclose, he didn't put a formal whistleblowing. He just said, I'm not doing what you're telling me because this is wrong. And he's lost his job. So you can see the type of whistleblowers we're dealing with, and then having to try now to solve their case or to minimize the adversity they're facing, to find the lawyers, the right type of lawyers who can challenge the workplace now for this. So it is really a very harsh reality that our whistleblowers are facing. And so, yes, so then there's the legal, as you can see, the majority with legal, and then counseling services we offer. Many ask for safety, but they're all looking for us to relocate. And so we haven't yet relocated anyone. We've only provided for two people, we've provided them a safe place to stay. So we will fund like a bed and breakfast, a place that has high security so they can be moved and stay there and stay there for two months and then move again. And that way we have the person moving, but we haven't relocated them the way witness protection. We're not working in that light in any way. The others, from a safety perspective, we're only giving guidance, or we're giving them help in can you upgrade, etc. And then last but not least, as I said, was the finance, which more and more those numbers are still low because people, when they ask us, can we pay their bonds? We can't pay it. When they ask us, can we pay the expensive private school fees, we obviously can't. So we offer the stipend and they think about it and only come back 2 or 3 months later. By then they're highly stressed from a financial. So we're encouraging them to at least take the stipend that can help you at least just get over the nitty-gritty. And that's us as Whistleblower House. At this point in time, I'm going to just leave the slide on where the whistleblowers are. And if there's any questions, I'm willing to take it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm glad you're able to join us. I don't know if Carlos has joined us.
Interacted with Cynthia a while back. Named Graham Simmons. I'm from you. And
Can you guys all hear, or should we share the mic?
Can't hear.
thank you. Cynthia, my name is Graham Simmons. I interacted with you some time ago because I'm a bit of an oddball. I'm from Bermuda. I worked in the US some years ago for a multinational corporation. I blew the whistle and they fired me. I went back to Bermuda and I thought that I would rebuild my life. Unfortunately, retaliation has resurfaced and I'm in this precarious predicament whereby I haven't done anything to agitate my former employer, but they've decided they want to do everything they can to make my life miserable. So I left Bermuda with my wife in hopes of finding some way to find a safe haven and bring a stop to what I see as criminal and highly unethical behavior. I found information on the Whistleblower House online. I was very impressed with the organization, still am, because of the way it's structured. And in my naivety, I even at one point offered to try to duplicate it outside of South Africa because I could not find a similar model. Regrettably, I am not able to find any kind of connection between the activities of the corporation that I formerly worked for and South Africa. So I wouldn't qualify to be able to get support from the Whistleblower House. And my question is really, what does somebody in my predicament do? And I'm going to direct this to you as well, Aris, because it specifically relates to what you raised. And that is, how does somebody like myself avail themselves of the resources that are available in light of the obvious safety risks, and they're very serious risks in my case, without depleting my resources and without overstepping my boundaries here? I'm a foreigner.
Yes.
I don't have the same level of access to the resources that people here would. And that's okay, because I shouldn't. I'm an outsider. At the same time, I'm trying to situate myself so that I'm safe without a clear map as to how to navigate. And it's extremely challenging. My most recent experience before I finish up was in a case where my former employer literally found a way to block my access to medical care in the US because they have global reach. I don't have the luxury of being able to cross a border and escape because their tentacles spread to many different parts of the world, which makes it extremely challenging for me. I'll leave it at that.
Well, Graham, I think you bring up a good point. And that's why I think some of the things that Georgina wants to see happen in the UK with a whistleblower office and the ability of Whistleblower House to have actual funds. I don't know of any organization in the US that's maybe some of the attorneys, they're shaking their heads, that actually help the whistleblower not only pay their legal bills, pay their medical bills. I know you've been a lifesaver for some of the whistleblowers in South Africa who can't pay their rent and that there isn't actual funding. But I know you wanted Ari to answer your question, not me. So I want to talk about the international.
I also want to.
So this is a classic example of what I said earlier on. And we're getting more technical now. Okay. Average whistleblowers are people of higher education skills. Can we agree to that? I mean,
yes.
You get a lot of high educated people that are asset to the society. Okay. They have credibility. Okay. They are ethical. So I'll say, if the country of the whistleblower employment is not looking after the whistleblowers, not protecting them, not appreciate them, it's killing them sometimes, persecute them, blacklisting them, all right? They go after the families. Then honestly, if they don't appreciate their exceptional skills at the jobs, other countries will be glad to utilize and employ them. And that's why I thought with that global treaty, okay, we can get issued international emergency visas for somebody like you, for example, okay, to a country who is also very interested in your skills, where you can get employment straight away and, create productivity in that country, but has an issue with, expert employees like yourself, honest, productive, educated. And instead of that, what is happening? We all get blacklisted. Okay? Come on, we know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So this is what I'm thinking. Let's look a bit out of the box. Okay? And think about it and entertain it. I mean, we have organizations. I think the United States has quite a few strategic companies. Blackstone, one of them. Okay? And they look at to invest into countries around the world, Africa, for example. But what are they looking at? What are the criteria? I think one of them is PSI, which is with your, let me just think of that. It's called PSI. Joe, can you help me beat the name? No, the other one. No, that's a Cisco. I'm talking about the perception. No, wait, it will come to me. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor. The corruption index. So they're looking at criteria of the corruption index. So we're saying now here, if those countries are going to get investors to invest, okay, multi-corporates, then they need to sign this treaty and show goodwill that, hey, okay, we're going to fight that. We're going to fight corruption at the national level. So how do you do that? You sign the treaty, you cooperate with a global international organization, because we want you to come and fund us. So That way, indirectly, they have to protect the whistleblower. And to me, the most important thing is exactly what you're going through. I went through it. Cynthia went through it. Babita Decorand, the late Babita Decorand, had no option. She got assassinated. Okay. How do those people escape the initial period of risk? Because only it takes a whistleblower to understand a whistleblower. Okay. Lawyers don't understand this. Corporate governance don't understand this. I mean, it's what we go through. How do we deal with a family? How do we deal with pay their bond? We get blacklisted. We can't get jobs. What do we do? So there has to be a fast way out, temporary. So we're going to abuse the system, and asylum seeking, whistleblower asylum seeking, international visa, emergency international visa, get out, go to a country that is not a hostile country. They don't try to terminate you or kill you. And also subsidize a salary, utilize you in key positions, governance position, for accountability, accountant positions. So it's a win-win situation. Thanks.
And I think Cynthia wanted to add something. And then I think I saw Georgina had a hand up somewhere.
Yeah.
And Pamela. But I think, Cynthia, you were trying to comment earlier.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And thank you, Aris. Greetings to you. I can see you on the other side there, well spoken. I would agree with Aris about this international visa and global treaty. And what I wanted to add is that I am on the board of Amnesty International in South Africa. And I'm sure Georgina knows Amnesty in the UK, and Aris had experience with them. What I do know is that Amnesty fights for human rights. And so for you, Mr. Simmons, is that I think there's a possibility that if we could have a discussion, maybe Aris, myself, and Georgina later with Jackie, just set it a meeting forward that we could perhaps consult with the UK Amnesty, because that would be the easiest for you to start with. I could consult with the South African one, but I thought if we could do the UK one, that would be a quicker way of them getting on board and discuss looking first at the international type visas, because they have taken people from different countries. I know they took someone from inside Africa and brought them to South Africa. It was a judge who was shot about 14 times. And Amnesty jumped in immediately, and he was flown to South Africa and put into one of our best hospitals. He was 6 months in a coma, and he survived. So he stayed in South Africa for a couple of years, and now he's currently gone to Belgium. And it was Amnesty that supported him. So I'm just thinking there is a way they could possibly support you, A, to get out of the country, B, help you, and then combine with various other organizations to get to reasonable, meaningful employment and safety for you and your wife. And I'm sorry, at the time when you wrote to us, you'd put your case forward and you're just asking to duplicate. And I didn't understand that you had such a bad experience. So let's look at your case differently, and let's see if we can give you help first. And then you can see how you get involved in helping others. So that's what I wanted to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. You're getting a round of applause. And I think Georgina had a hand, and then Pamela. Georgina, you're on mute.
I must say you're about £50 today for the being muted. I listened to that story and it sounds like so many. My first question is, are you safe in America, sir, where you are now?
No.
No?
No.
No. Is the answer no? So can you apply for asylum? Because this isn't easy. we're all NGOs. We have very limited resources, and deciding who to support is really difficult. But I'll leave that with, and I'll deal with this offline with Cynthia and Aris, yourself and Jackie. But what I would say is that asylum rules do assist already, and we have to be really careful as whistleblowers and whistleblower advocates not to keep reinventing rules, but look at how the existing rules can really help what we are trying to achieve. And fundamentally, we're trying to achieve the investigation and addressing of wrongdoing, and we keep getting dragged down the rabbit hole, a bit like Alice in Wonderland, of into the world of protecting whistleblowers. And the more we do that, the more distracted we become. I'm not saying we don't do it, but we have to give as much and more emphasis to the development of the framework that ensures that wrongdoing is addressed, wrongdoing is stopped. So I don't particularly think that that helps the individual case here, but I think as a think tank, and coming back to this idea of the treaty, and I'm not quite on the same page as you with this, Aris, and it's a good place to discuss it, but I think the treaty is a lot more than goodwill. Same for you, Cynthia. I think this has got to be not just a signing up to something, but a global legal undertaking to ensure that everyone is what we're all signed up to gives us the rights that the gentlemen in the room, and many of us have not had afforded to us because that legislation doesn't exist. Goodwill's all very well, but when governments change or people change in organisations, the goodwill tends to go with it, was actually defining something in law, pushing forward on the investigations, etc. That is the only way that we are going to get the protection for every single citizen. It's about providing a safety net. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Georgina. A global legal undertaking. I'll do that tomorrow, okay? Sure.
I'll find the other button again now.
And I know Pamela wanted to comment, and then we do have one of the attorneys in the room who has some thoughts I can't wait to hear.
Right, so I have two questions, one for Ari on the treaty. My understanding is a treaty is usually between countries. So I'm wondering how you propose to do that. And my second question is for Cynthia. I just wondered about your funding. What you're doing is pretty much a blueprint for what we plan to do. But the problem is funding. So did your funding come from philanthropists within your country or from external to your country? Or is that a secret?
It's no secret. So we went through the normal funding routes, that donor funding, whatever is being advertised for funding, that looked at either whistleblowing issues, violation of human rights, anything that fitted in the whistleblower category. The first year, everyone turned us down, but we were recommended by a company called Corruption Watch to approach an organization called Millennium Trust. They're based in Cape Town. And we approached them and they sent us the forms. We completed, we submitted all the information, and they were having a board meeting in November. By December, they emailed us a letter stating their board has approved funding for us. And in January, they actually put their money where their mouth was, and they actually paid into our bank account. The amount they offered us, and it's in our financials, so I can disclose it, was 5 million right up front, South African rand, which is a hell of a lot of money when you're starting from base zero. And immediately we could start helping whistleblowers. I think with them putting in that money, and other funders, so when we speak to other funders, because it's an ongoing activity, and we tell them we've already got this, they've become encouraged. So far they haven't matched the 5 million, but two other organizations one was called Business Leadership South Africa, they are two of their organizations within the business leadership gave 500 each, and so they offered $1 million. And then another organization from the national lotteries, because we're not yet 2 years old, they said as a startup organization you can apply for 500,000. And then we applied for we applied for the European Union Fund 2 months ago. And they've just given us feedback to say that we've passed all that. So we will probably be hearing from them with the received. So that will be the first time we're getting external funding. The funding we received to date was internal, and the majority from one funder. They're willing to fund us for the next 3 years. They have one condition, that they're not the only funders. Just out of fundraising, though, here's an idea which I'm going to do next year. I proposed it to our board. I want to do a walk for whistleblowers in our country. So it's a Camino which you all know about. I know Europe has it. I know the US have huge hikes across the mountains. But this is, I want to do this hike and invite other whistleblowers to walk with me so we can share their stories, share their plights on air, via YouTube, via short podcasts, and that way the story gets out. But the way I want to do it and propose to do it is that individuals pay, so you do it tiered level, that individuals pay an amount, be it a small amount. In our country, our currency is rand, so 1 rand, if I walk 640 kilometers, they pay 1 rand, it's only 640, doesn't look a lot. But if I can attract 1 million people paying 640 rand, that would be great. So that's the idea. And then bigger companies can pay 100, 1,000 rand. The blue chip companies, we want to motivate that they pay bigger amounts in that tier. That way we start, because funders want to see what's the organization doing to raise funds themselves and not just asking funds out there. So that is the intention. So we're already planning that for next year to show funders that we're also doing our bit to raise funding, but it's also a method of raising the awareness and the plights of whistleblowers, because out of this, we hope we can pay the bonds for whistleblowers, that we can pay off their debts, that they're not blacklisted, and we also want to motivate for employment for whistleblowers. So it's quite a broad plan, and hence the reason there'll be everyday podcasting, everyday blogging, every day showcasing one whistleblower to speak up, 1 or 2 about their cases. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, that's amazing. I love it. And for the American audience, 640 rand is about $5. So it gives us a little perspective on if we could just each raise a few dollars from a lot of people, we can do more to be very helpful in this space and help people with their survival needs and their legal cases. I think Richard, and I think we have another mic.
Yeah, thanks. Greetings to all the presenters, and thanks for your great work where you're located. I really appreciate the sort of the international aspects of whistleblowing and how whistleblowers can be affected across borders. I just want to flag an issue for everyone to think about. And as you all do your work, one of the issues in the United States is U.S. law often does not recognize extraterritorial action taken against an individual. And a lot of people work in organizations that are multinational. So, for example, if I work in an organization that's does work and functions in the United States, but I have managers in the UK or in Spain, and I'm fired by those managers in the UK or Spain, even though US law should apply to me, it won't, because the action was taken from another country. So we need to think about, especially as the economies and the movement grows and becomes more mobile, people are working, remotely. All of these things, companies will take advantage of in terms of avoiding whistleblower protection. And so I really like the idea of a treaty. I think that's a great idea. Maybe there's also smaller steps that could be taken. For example, trying to recognize each other's laws and have those laws be protective of individuals from the US to the UK to South Africa to wherever. So I think that that's an issue that we have to keep our eye on. It does already happen here that people can't get protected because of this extraterritorial problem. I'm sure it's probably prevalent elsewhere. And it's a great, unfortunate loophole for multinational entities. The other thing I'd like to say is, with respect to those of you outside the US, if you have whistleblowers that are involved with companies that function in the US, and there's a possibility that their whistleblowing may demonstrate a foreign corrupt practice, in other words, they were involved in bribery or other actions in your country, or violations of US law in some way, securities law, other laws, our firm, I would be happy to try to issue spot and help individuals determine if they would be eligible for reward programs in the United States as a result of their whistleblowing in other countries. So I think that's something that we can do to help facilitate either protections or rewards for people who are in those situations. Thanks.
Thank you. I said earlier, I think we need to make that an individual's choice, because people in other countries, I know there's all kinds of opinions. Georgina and I've had this back and forth discussion, the difference between reward programs and restitution for retaliation. I know in the bounty hunting idea that this is your civic duty, you shouldn't be rewarded for helping your government. But I think that needs to still be an individual choice, and people should have a right to make that choice about whether or not they want to pursue a reward or that they want to pursue restitution for retaliation.
Isn't it ultimately about
Vanessa, I think there also have been some questions in the chat. Paul, I don't know that I can see all of the chat, but I think we have another question also in the room. Their mic is coming your way.
Hi, good morning. My area of whistleblowing was philanthropy. And so I'm hearing some things and I want to weigh in. The first thing, Cynthia, you probably already know this, but when you are demonstrating to donors how much money you've raised, do not forget to include volunteer hours. So anything that is offered pro bono, I know like 2012 in the United States, just regular unskilled work was for volunteers was worth $23 an hour. So add that up. Then if you're using anybody with skilled labor, such as an attorney, physician, psychologists, you put them in not pro bono, not for zero, but for what their regular rate is. And then it's in-kind contributions, but that's the equivalent to money that you've raised because you get those services. So it looks even better on your data sheet when you submit it. Okay. And then another issue, Ari, the best way probably to illustrate this is just through a story. Ari, you mentioned this really great suggestion, right? So how all these issues tie in together. You mentioned BlackRock and that as a company, a multinational company, and how if we're in one country, the tentacles of the power reach us everywhere. That cannot be more true. So somebody who I knew in philanthropy, his business is defense, but I met him in philanthropy, going to yesterday about contractors being above government. That's very accurate. So for him, while I was going through what I was going through, and I was contemplating writing a book on my experience, and I said, will anybody ever bother with me again if I do this book? And he just looks at me and goes, what do you think? So when you're blackballed, like you're blackballed forever. But anyway, but to your point, you were making the really rational suggestion that perhaps these people of high intelligence and extremely high value within their industry could be employed, but their friends are the ones who run the companies. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but the reality is a lot of those doors are closed. That's just something that we're facing. And then a final thought on philanthropy is, I've been making notes and I'm happy to offer the recommendations. There are segmented ways. So the more delineated the programs can be, the more opportunity there are for donors to come in, maybe not as whistleblowing, but for for governance, for mental health, for corruption, for legal, for education, things like that. But in the United States, something very interesting as an obstacle that we're facing here, a name that we heard yesterday is, in the world of philanthropy, public enemy number one. Because again, we're looking at systems and not exposing systems, and we're looking at powerful individuals who do not want to be exposed. Philanthropy is an arm of that. And the only person in Congress in the last 30 years who have proposed any type of philanthropic intervention or reform, Chuck Grassley. You mentioned his name, and there's a whole bunch of people who they'll say nice things to you. They will never fund you, and they'll tell their friends not to fund you. But it's just something to be aware of.
Oh yeah, no, we're more than aware. Getting funding for the whistleblowers is, I keep saying we're not sick children and warm puppies. This is a hard issue, one, to even understand what the impact is, because every case is so different. It's not like we all have the same one case and the one story. So funding whistleblowers and trying to get them any kind of help, I think is part of the challenge, just because people don't even understand. And then, there's a lot of negative stigma to the word whistleblower, where tattletales, not truth tellers, where rats and snitches, not protectors and ethicists. So, I think there's a couple of battles on the philanthropic front. As my team could probably tell you, it's one of my biggest laments is that we can't even afford to hire some full-time staff to do the work that we do. We rely on those volunteer hours, and trust me, we're probably all putting in about a 40-hour week most weeks, just trying to keep Whistleblowers of America, which is a very small organization, up and running and putting together events like this. So I do see there are some questions in the chat, and I see Kathy Forbes has written, it is extremely important to protect whistleblowers. Do you find that employers, not knowing the whistleblower, will then go after the employees to find out who the whistleblower was? And what about people standing in for the whistleblower to protect all of them? I think Georgina had to drop off because she's on her way to Cambridge, but I think that's the point of her whistleblower office bill, is that the whistleblower can make a discrete disclosure to that office, and then that office takes the case and they adjudicate it. They run with it. They become the advocate for the issue, so that the whistleblower, and I think we talked about this some yesterday, the whistleblower then can remain anonymous and continue to work at their job and hopefully never be known. But is there anybody else that wanted to comment? Heidi, is that kind of what your office does?
Sorry, can you repeat the last question, Jackie?
Yeah, so when whistleblowers come to your office, do they get to be anonymous and you take over sort of the running of the case?
Yeah, we can do, because they can notify and report to us as external, and then they can be confidential. And that's also implemented in the law. We have this duty of confidentiality. So they can come to our office, and the enterprise or the employer does not know the name of the person. So they can be confidential when they come to us. They can choose.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing, because when they notify or report to us, most of them have tried to do this internally. And they've spoken to the employee representative, to the safety delegate, to the leaders, and they have done this internally. And then they're quite tired when they come to us. Some of them are, they've been doing this for a long time. And that's why it's important that they can have this duty of confidentiality when they come to us as a public authority.
Okay, thank you so much. And I see Jennifer Foster has her hand up.
Hi, Jackie. It's just today. I think we take for granted, certainly in Europe, that whistleblowers it's unsafe for whistleblowers. And only today, I got some very shocking news that an Irish environmentalist whistleblower was injected with a substance on his way back to his country of abode from India. And it's shocking. So I would like us all to realize that in different countries, especially in Europe, we take it nearly for granted. You blow the whistle, and maybe even in Canada and certainly in Norway, you blow the whistle and you're fairly safe. In other countries, what Cynthia is talking about is true and it's real, and it's happening, in a lot of countries. And, my heart goes out, and we can sit here in Ireland, UK, Norway and say, hands clean, we're not helping. But, at the end of the day, these people are really suffering, and we have to really be sympathetic towards them.
Yes, and Pamela, I see your comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but yeah, what I would like to say is, right, so we don't shoot them, right? We don't execute them. However, we destroy them in other ways. We're much more sophisticated in how we destroy people. And that is the value of Jennifer Fraser's book. She says we can now demonstrate. Neuroscience has allowed us to demonstrate with brain scans in hand the actual physical damage that we are doing to each other by bullying, reprisals, and so on and so forth. And we need that to be interjected into the discussion about, it's really not much safer here. Okay, they're like the Walking Dead. A lot of people, they cannot function. Some people do not recover. You can recover if you get the proper treatment and you're aware of what's going on, what's happening to you. That's a big problem. Many people are just not aware what's happening to them. They certainly can recover, but the resources that understand and help all of that just aren't here. So we see suicides. One whistleblower testified in Parliament. She knew of 4 people threatening suicide, and 3 of them succeeded. Right. And that was within a fairly short period of time. That doesn't it's not seeped into the public consciousness yet. That is the huge job that we have to have. Can't say we're much better than South Africa. We really can't. Because why? Because we're a little more not so obvious about the damage we do. We have to be really frank with ourselves about this. This is abhorrent. Abominable, unacceptable. Look at the United States with all of their money, all of their wonderful legislation. For all of these years, lawyers in organizations like GAP and other organizations have been fighting to protect whistleblowers from reprisals. But guess what? They're still going on.
Yeah.
To me, this is a sign that we have. This is normalizing deviance. We've said, okay, we accept that reprisals are going to occur. And so we're just going to, just fight you in the courts and so on. We have to somehow, get that information and knowledge. It's been around for years and years. It just has not seeped into the public consciousness, the damage and the wrongdoing that we're doing. And we're destroying our democracies, really. We really have to give this the sense of urgency that it is. And that's why I'm part of this group. It's totally urgent.
Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I keep saying that suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among working aged adults, and we don't look enough at the influence of the workplace on that. I think Julie, I'm so used to saying Jenny, Julie, had a question as well, and we're going to get her a mic.
So I was just going to add to that. I think one of the issues, at least in my experience and other whistleblowers that I've talked to, once a retaliation begins, and maybe it begins right after you blow the whistle, and it is done in covert ways in the United States because we're very good at it. Some of us are very trained well in blackmail, coercion, corruption, influence, and all of those types of things. And so that skill set exists, at least within the industry that I came from. Not only am I skilled in it, but so are my colleagues and my supervisors who I literally called the whistle on. So they're very good at doing that behavior in ways that intimidate me, but kind of lay under the law and fly through these retaliation cases that, like my attorney had said, I think we've had 2 that have been dismissed. But the problem with that is that if we allow that retaliation, which is death threats and things that I would say are criminal in nature that do lead to things like nerve agents or things that expand once you leave the United States, that someone can track you and follow you there. If we allow that type of retaliation to continue, we are saying that it is okay for you to do that to a whistleblower. And so in my experience, that retaliation just became more and more dangerous and more prevalent. And it also became, I would say, more, instead of being as silent as it was in the beginning, in the 10th year and in the last few years of my life, it has been blatant and outright retaliation because it's been allowed to continue with no accountability and no responsibility held on the agency, the organization, or the individuals that are involved in that. And so I can call out their names, but what good does it do if there are no laws to protect me and to give me that safe place? And I will say that just in my experience in working in investigations and interrogation and national security for 23 years and doing this for so long, it wears on someone to the point where maybe you are going to drop your claim, or you are not going to go to court, or you are not going to testify or write that book, or whatever it is that we need you to do to speak out. And so over time, I think allowing that retaliation could silence whistleblowers, or even stop whistleblowers who are on the fence right now, ready to raise their hand on causes that we need to know about. Watching us go through this journey might stop them altogether from raising their hands. So we are silencing a generation that may be rising up within those agencies that are watching those of us who are seniored or tenured, who have been in agencies and organizations for decades, go through that. And so I think the repercussions are, decades and generations that we are saying that it's not okay to raise your hand. And if you do, this is what will happen, and you will have no protection. I think my other question, and just in listening to the feeling about just your family and your own physical security not being safe. So, there are experts and subject matter experts like myself who do industrial physical security, and we do executive protection. And, I would do some of that pro bono. If I can do it at a facility behind a few walls and a few fences, I can certainly do it at someone's house or at someone's place of employment. So I think that would be my other question. I love the idea that in Cynthia's model, there is it's not just financial, it's also ensuring that well-being of safety. So that you can get in that vehicle. So And there are apps and other ways that we train people, I guess, in a lot of our sectors, not necessarily for whistleblowers, but why can't that expertise and that technical subject matter that some of us know be used in this setting and for whistleblowers? Because I no longer work in the government, so I'm pretty sure I'm free to create it on my own and to head on over to whoever might need me. And I would also do a pro bono internationally as well. So I'm just curious, you have to start somewhere. And if you don't have the funding, There are some of us within this community that know what that feels like, that might be able to make a contribution that is pro bono to begin, let's say, physical security, or just, I think it's so imperative that you have that safety and that feeling of safety.
Yeah, no,
to move forward.
So I really appreciate what you just said, and we may have to take you up on that and figure out how to implement that kind of plan. Joe had a question, and then John.
Yeah, I have a chance to see me. So I may be immodest, but I'm going to claim to be the greatest federal whistleblower of all time, in that I have prevailed 8 times at the Merit System Protection Board, and my whistleblowing played a role in a law that resulted in the law mentioned yesterday, the Energy Employee Occupational Illness Compensation Program Act of 2000, by which 140,000 people have gotten over $20 billion in compensation. Of course, my whistleblowing is about workplace health and safety issues, and my prevailing helped elevate that issue. Okay, the Department of Energy is the custodian of America's nuclear stockpile, the lead federal agency for securing nuclear weapons material around the world, and my whistleblowing has implications for nuclear weapons. Okay, the whole ball of wax, right? And so maybe being the greatest of all time, it's not just relevant to me. Okay, I'm still employed, still married, but so why does this go on and on and on? It's legal ethics. The attorneys will deal. We are open. We are hired guns. Our client is never wrong. We will do whatever we can to defeat your claims. Okay. And by current legal ethics, I can't say that they're wrong. They're being, quote unquote, zealous advocates for their client. So my point to the panel is, most whistleblowers is not against a person, it's against an institution, a government, a corporation. And shouldn't we as a society hold these corporations, institutions to a higher standard? And if we do so, shouldn't that be reflected in legal ethics, that the attorney shouldn't be saying, I'm a hired gun, my client is never wrong, I will do whatever I can to defeat your claim. The American Bar Association writes the model rules for professional conduct, which are now adopted in whole or in part by almost every legal licensing jurisdiction in the US. The American Bar Association claims the privilege of self-regulation to write these rules. So my point is, whistleblowers could go to the American Bar Association and to the committee that writes its rules of professional conduct and saying, wait. We have to have some exemptions for this. I'm a hired gun. My client's never wrong. Whatever I can get away with. And not just for the whistleblower, for all of us. The word I would use for whistleblower in 2013 is, truth tellers, whatever. We're redeemers. We're redeemers of these societies and institutions. And if we don't redeem them, I'm afraid our civilization is doomed. Okay. And I'm saying that having tapped too many nuclear weapons on the depleted uranium noses. I have done that. Okay. All right. This is real. We are having nice lives, but when I look forward, I see many cliffs. I see whistleblowers being necessary for the trustworthy societal institutions that we need to have any real hope for our civilization. All right, thank you.
All right, well, we only have a few minutes left. John, a really quick question.
It's not really a question, it's kind of a comment, but that's okay. I'll take it up right.
Okay, all right. Well, I wanted to give the panelists each a chance to make any kind of closing remarks and then to thank you. I know there's been a lot of comments in the chat. I see, Pamela, about the difference between confidentiality and anonymity. And yes, I think that is a really important distinction that we have to make because it legally has different ramifications. And we will definitely, I see Cynthia wants to get your contact information, so we'll make sure all of that happens. Ladies, anybody else on the panel that wanted to make any closing remarks? Any follow-up thoughts? Ari, did you have anything?
Yes.
All right, let Ari then say some final remarks.
The comment from Pamela about the anonymity and what was the other one? Confidentiality. So I was a member of an organization in Europe through Transparency International, which we worked on the EAT project, expanding anonymous tipping. And that's quite interesting the way you address it, because confidentiality, that's a problem. Anonymity, I believe on it. I'd rather go anonymous and do a tip, And we established that mechanism, and now it's became a legislation in Europe. And, they allocate a number. That's it. They cannot come back to you. So that's a way out also. If I can do a tip, and that's why I think we didn't got we didn't adopt a reward system in Europe, as the Americans did. I will go anonymously, do a tip, and that's the end of it. My conscience is cleared, but we establish a mechanism that's going to actually follow it up, and we get a feedback. Now, my understanding is here, when I spoke to a lawyer yesterday, that when you do a federal claim, the whistleblower is in a black box. He doesn't get any feedback. He doesn't know if there's an investigation going on. He doesn't know how long it's going to take. So he sits there and he waits. Meantime, he's thinking, hey, what's going to happen? Will I suffer retaliation? Will I get any money of it? That psychological works on the whistleblower. So we're saying, give us feedback. Don't disclose the case. Let us know once a month. We are looking into it. There's progress, or sorry, you're talking BS, It helps the whistleblower. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, everybody who's joined us from all over the world. I know even in the some of the parts of, and one.
The organization. Oh, thank you. Hi, my name is Anne. I'm Joe's wife. And I was just saying that I was trying to help this lady who worked for the same organization that I did. And she was about to blow the whistle on our employer. And I tried to guide her saying, okay, if you want to do this, you've got to have your evidence and so on and so forth. To put the story in a nutshell, the organization eventually fired her. It had a tremendous psychological impact on her, to the point of her threatening, telling me that she was contemplating suicide. She actually turned on me and on Joe, and she called me several unsavory names. And for our own health and safety, I had to cut off contact with her, much to my chagrin. I have no idea where she is now, physically or psychologically. I don't even know if she's alive. But to all of you here who are caring so much about the whistleblowers, please remember to keep vigilant about their and your aftercare. I would love to get back in touch with Gina, and that's not her real name. I'd love to get back in touch with her, but I can't. I just can't. And to, let's see, Pamela, I hear what you're saying about the difference between confidentiality and anonymity. The thing is, with either one of those, if you represent the whistleblower going forward within your organization, sooner or later, and I know this from experience too, people are going to put two and two together, and they're going to figure out who you are and where you are, which office you work in. So you've got to be extremely careful about that. And thank you for all the good work that all of you do.
And thank you so much. I appreciate everybody, because we do need that network of support. I know these aren't always easy stories and easy cases. And that's why I keep saying we need this trauma-informed perspective, because when you understand whistleblower retaliation as a traumatic event in somebody's life, you begin to understand their behavior and the obsessive thinking and the compulsiveness and the fearfulness, the anger. That is all part of being traumatized, just like a combat veteran is traumatized. So are our whistleblowers. So thank you to our wonderful international panel. I think we have a lot of work to do. I hope this is just setting the stage for that. and that we will have more opportunities to collaborate, maybe have conferences in other countries, maybe like Greece, maybe. And we're going to transition to lunch here, dinner there, but thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.